So, gonna kick it off a little bit. How do you get into acting? Like, how did you start your career, basically?
So how did you mean like how did I personally get into it or my
Yeah, like, how
advice?
did you personally?
So that's a good question. I growing up as a kid, I always loved performing. I was very extroverted. I loved make believe. I was a huge nerd. Still am actually. I love sci-fi, comic books, Star Wars, the whole deal. Um, but I never thought acting was a viable profession because I live in Montreal or lived in Montreal, which is in Quebec, which is in Canada. And Canada is great. It's a great country, but it's not exactly a mecca of, it's not like a star making kind of place. The actors I always saw was in Hollywood, and that seemed like such a far away place. It didn't seem like a possibility. Um, so I never considered it as a viable career here in Montreal. So instead, when I was done high school, I went to I studied biochemistry. I was going to be a biochemist, believe it or not. So I studied sciences, and I was miserable. I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't bad at it, but it didn't make me feel fulfilled. And what I really wanted to do was act. So I said, screw it. Let me take the plunge. I switched disciplines. Went to college. I started in French college. I transferred to an English college called Dawson here, and I joined their theater program. I actually got refused my first time I auditioned because I was pretty bad. Actually, I was terrible. I wasn't very good. A teacher suggested I try, and they accepted me the next year. And so yeah, I went through the acting program. After that, I went out, found myself an agent, and then for about 10 years, I worked, very little as an actor and had a side job as a waiter, which is par for the course for a lot of actors. And one day I just quit my job because I had to choose between theater and my waitering job. So I chose theater. And actually, that's when things kind of picked up. I slowly got booked on a few things. I started working for Ubisoft. I got booked on Assassin's Creed, and that kind of kickstarted my motion capture career. And that eventually down the line led to Watch Dogs and Watch Dogs 2. Um, yeah, so I just kind of, once I got my agent and I started auditioning regularly, it took about 10 years. Things just started unlocking for me. And, there's never any guarantee of work, but I work more regularly now and I have better opportunities now. I've got more of a career, more of a reputation too, which helps. So yeah, things just kind of unlocked naturally. And through that, I pursued my love of stunt fighting. So I studied stage combat at Fight Directors Canada. People asked me to teach, so I teach stage combat. Eventually, they asked me to direct, so now I direct voice actors in projects sometimes. So whenever new jobs, new opportunities pop up, I take them when I can, and if it's something I'm well suited for, it tends to turn into more work down the line. So that it really built slowly over like took at least a solid decade of paying my dues before things started to kind of flow a bit more. There was never like even rent, which is probably the biggest thing I've ever done. Uh, Great though it was, it did radically unlock all these other jobs for me. Like I still audition for stuff. Yet last year I had a terrible year as an actor. I barely worked. This is kind of the risk you run as an actor, but I guess.
Yeah, and did you do like anything to specifically get into games, or did that just kind of happen?
So that pretty much just happened. Kind of. I did push a little in two ways. One, when I heard a friend of mine is a big gamer, and at one point he sent me an article or something, a link that was coming out from Ubisoft called Assassin's Creed. And I'm like, wow, that sounds really cool. And he's like, hey, they're doing that in Montreal. It's Ubisoft Montreal. And that'd be cool to work on a game like that. So I contacted my agent and I'm like, look, can you get me an audition for this once you hear? Can you push? Can you do whatever? And she did. She actually got an all NPC part on Assassin's Creed. So in the first Assassin's Creed, there's a side quest where this dude is like, oh, my I lost my flags. They're scattered throughout the city. Can you find my flags and bring them back? 100 flags, you get a thing. So I was the flag guy, but it was awesome. I got to work on that a little. But my true break kind of came from a studio for either an audition. I was early, which is always a good thing to do when you're an actor. And I look and out on the terrace, they have I see my buddy Simon, who's like a director, and he's talking to some guy I don't know, and they're having lunch. So I'm like, wow, I'm not gonna be a stranger. So I go outside. I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? Nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Shawn. Can I join you? Sit with them. And Simon introduces this other guy. His name is Sylvain. And I was like, what do you do, Sylvain? You work at Ubisoft? He's like, yeah, I do mocap. I'm in charge of casting and mocap, you know, over at Ubisoft. And I was like, mocap, what is that? That sounds, I didn't know what it was. So he explained. And I did something I've almost never done before or since in my career is I really kind of like pitched myself, like tried to like pitch who I was as a performer, as an asset. Usually my agent does that, but in the moment I was like, listen, man, I'm bilingual. Because a lot of people work there are French. I've got a martial arts background. I do stunt fighting. I'm very physical. I do mime, clown work. If ever you need someone to come do some mocap, I'd love to, give it a try. And he's like, yeah, I'll keep you in mind. And I thought he's probably just saying that because he probably gets that question a lot. But a couple weeks later, I got an email saying, hey, can you come in for half a day? And they used me on some small project. I forget what it was. So I did half a day. I did great. They really liked me. They brought me back for a full day a few days later. And eventually, through that and auditioning, I booked Machiavelli on Assassin's Creed. And then they just started hiring me without auditions pretty much for Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. And then I played a smaller character in Assassin's Creed 3. And then I just worked on NPCs and stuff in Assassin's Creed 4 and 5 and all that. I don't work on them anymore. But one job kind of led to the other, and because mocap was so new, motion capture was such a new technology. When they had people who were good at it, they were valuable because it was hard to learn the ropes. Now it's more commonplace, so there's more people in the market. But uh, yeah, the kind of one thing snowballed to the next, and so now it's a mix of like this year they're like, hey. They're working on I think it's been announced, the Assassin's Creed Japan, right? Um, they're working on that, and they're like, "Hey, can you come do the mocap for one of our actors who can't be there?" So I'm like, "Yeah." So no auditions, came in, did a day of work for them, which was great because they know what I can do. And then, opposite that, I auditioned. I did a self tape here at home in my studio, sent it in for a video game that's shooting this year, and I got cast as one of the characters. That wasn't because of any connections I had. It was just, I guess I did a good job. So it's a mix of both of those, but it's nice. Like to me, the best place to be as an actor is jobs coming to you without having to chase every job down. Um, Auditioning can be a fun process, but I find it a little tedious sometimes. So I'd rather just get work. But it's fun to audition for projects that are fun and new and challenging. So yeah, one thing just kind of led to the other, and that in turn led to me getting directing jobs now on occasion. I'll direct motion capture or voice or whatever else they need me to do, or teach as well. I teach as well in some schools.
All right. So you said you got involved with Watch Dogs like later down the line when you started doing a couple games and it just kind of led to being in Watch Dogs. I'm correct in thinking that you were in the first Watch Dogs as well, weren't you?
Yeah, so I don't think I ever auditioned for the first Watch Dogs. I think I'd been working with Ubisoft enough on Assassin's Creed and other games. They're like, hey, just come in to do some small characters. So they actually cast me as. Have you played the first Watch Dogs game?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the opening scene where Aiden goes to the baseball stadium and he goes underneath into the bleachers and a bunch of dudes have been killed. And he's like, what the hell's
Yeah,
going on?
yeah.
And then it's when Jordy shows up, right, for the first time. And then this dude comes around the corner. He's like, yo! And he's got like a gun. He's got like a tattoo on his half his face. And Jordy stabs him. Like he comes up behind him and stabs him. That dude is me. I did his mocap. And later on, he has a scene in prison with Aiden, where Aiden is like, I'm going to add 60 years to your sentence unless you tell me what I need to know. So I got cast as him. And then I did a bunch of mocap for like there's a pimp getting arrested off in the distance during that opening sequence. That's me. When Aiden turns himself into the cop was like, get on the ground and arrests him. That's me. So I did a bunch of little NPCs, voice and mocap for that kind of stuff. But because I had worked on forget now. I think there was some DLC or something for the first Watch Dogs. The director, they got another director for that. And that guy, whose name was Lars, he worked with me because I'd already been working on the project. So we worked together a bit. And then years later, when Watch Dogs 2 was announced, and they wanted to do a demo of Watch Dogs 2. Lars from Watch Dogs 1 DLC was the director. So he's like, hey, for this wrench character, instead of casting some like big brutish dude, this kind of some guy who sounds like wrench looks, uh I want to get Shawn. I worked with him. I like him. I want him to take that manic energy of his and juxtapose that over the character of Wrench. And then he's like, "Can you be like this character on Mr. Robot?" He gave me a reference. I wasn't familiar with the show, but I looked it up, and it's like this motor mouth, like almost like the dragon in Mulan or Donkey in Shrek that just kind of never shuts up. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's my specialty." So I did that for the demo. And the understanding was that once the game got approved, they probably recast all the parts with like bigger name actors and people from like LA or New York or Vancouver or England. England has a lot of actors, especially in the Assassin's Creed games, who get cast to come work here. Um, but I guess I did such an iconic performance as Wrench, they kept me. Everyone else was not from Montreal. I was the only Montreal actor they kept. And they recast the guy who played Marcus with Ruffin. Yeah, and then that was Watch Dogs 2. So, in a sense, Assassin's Creed led to Watch Dogs, which led to Wrench in Watch Dogs 2. It's Montreal's a fairly small community compared to say Toronto or Vancouver. So uh, when you do good work, it goes a long way because a lot of people know each other, right? So a lot of my career is about the interconnectivity of the work I've done. And if I were to pick up and move to New York, LA, or Vancouver, or England, or anywhere, um, I feel like I'd almost be starting back at zero because all that connectivity would be gone. But that's what I've built for myself here, and it works for me. I mean, I'm always taking on new things, and so far, knock on wood, uh, so far things are going great.
So you said you got involved in Watch Dogs 2 by like basically a referral, like someone and like, oh yeah, this guy's good, we'll get him on. Like, do you know much about the game before you start? How much do you know?
It's a great question, actually. Um, so it depends on the game. It depends on your part. It also depends how much of it's been written or finalized because there's various departments that are working at various speeds when it comes to most big games. Um, for Watch Dogs 2 specifically, because Wrench was such a big part of the story, I believe I had all of my scenes. So all the scenes that pertain to Wrench, I had the scenes. So, it says interior, DedSec, headquarters, daytime. Wrench is watching TV. Marcus walks in. Hey, Wrench, blah, blah. Wrench says this. Um, so you have all that beforehand because you got to learn your lines. Because when you do motion capture, you have to be off book. You have to know your lines by heart. It's not like doing voice work in a studio where you can have your script in front of you. So that's what's lovely about mocap. This my favorite form of acting is it's very similar to theater, and I came up with theater. I trained in theater, so preparing for a mocap role is very much like training for a theater role. Film is a similar process too, but film is more forgiving because you do smaller scenes and smaller takes. Theater is one big take if you think about it, and mocap it can depend. It kind of goes all over the spectrum between theater and film, actually, in terms of how it's shot or whatever. Um, so, you get the script, you learn your lines, but you don't necessarily get the entire game. Like, for example, uh, I shot Watch Dogs 2 and did all the mocap, all the studio voice work. And then when the game finally came out, I was super excited. I played the game several times. And there was a fair amount of discovery because there'd be a scene or a plot thread that I had no idea that it was there because it didn't relate to Wrench in any way. Or I'd be doing additional dialogue in the voice booth where Wrench is talking to Josh, and I have some idea of context, but maybe not fully because I don't necessarily get that script. If I'm in the studio, I'm just getting my lines. And then I'll play the game and be like, oh, that's this. Okay, this must be the scene where, right? So I'll discover where my work went um, with certain scenes. So you don't get the full story normally, but you get enough of the story to act. But unfortunately, that usually means you get all the spoilers, right? Like that's the literally the only drawback I can think of in terms of being a video game voice actor and mocap actor is any game I work on is spoiled for me, like automatically. If there's a twist, when Horatio dies in Watch Dogs 2, of course I knew he died because we have scenes that deal with that. The big twist at the end of this, or the villain's actually that, or anything like that is spoiled for me. But I mean, that's a small price to pay to be able to do something I love. Um, so it depends, but most games, because I usually play smaller parts, I just know whatever surrounds my character, and the rest I have to discover by playing the game, which is great because then I get to enjoy at least some parts of it. You know what I mean? Whereas in a film, you get the whole script, you get the entire thing, you read the whole thing. A play, same thing, you know it, you know the entire thing. A game, because it's so big and has so many moving parts, you can sometimes get away with just knowing a smaller part of it, which I like because I do like the game. I'm a big gamer, so I want to be able to enjoy games at least on that level.
And like for Wrench, his face is like covered all the time, basically. He's got the mask. Um, so like, is there any differences like doing mocap when the facial performance isn't going to be seen really? Or is it just the same sort of thing?
So, y yes and no. It's an added challenge, but I think I have an advantage, vis-a-vis that challenge because I'm a very, very expressive person, right? Because of my theater background and because of just how I am. Like I have a lot harder time on film because I'm very expressive and move a lot. So on a tight close-up that doesn't read so well all the time. Um, so what was great about Wrench is, you know, when it's performance capture is when they capture your body, your face, and your voice, right? Mocap is motion capture is just your body. Performance capture is the whole performance. So when you do performance capture, you have this helmet with a camera in front of you that picks up your facial expressions and a mic that records your voice. So everyone in the production had a helmet if they're being performance captured. So Marcus, you know, uh, Josh, all those people, T-Bone, everyone had a helmet, including me. And you might think like, well, you're the only one who doesn't need one, right? Because your face is covered. But what they would do is instead of animating my face, they would use the reference of my expressions to then inform the emojis or the not the emojis, but the symbols that would pop up on Wrench's mask, right? So, if Marcus says something, I could have any number of reactions. My reaction is to, do that, they'll have that on the mask as opposed to if I laugh, it'll probably be, a happy thing, right? They can cap because my body language is only so much of the performance, and I'm pretty good at performing with my body language, but them capturing my face allowed them to inform what's probably one of the most iconic aspects of Wrench, which is the the his visor, right? The LEDs on his visor. So uh, it wasn't any more challenging because I just played it like I wasn't wearing a mask in a sense because it didn't really functionally matter to Wrench in his interactions, right? Wrench wears the mask because it protects him from people seeing who he is and what he's feeling, and it's just a wall between him and the world where he feels safe, right? So I, as an actor, don't need that safety because I trust the actors I'm with, so I don't physically need that protection. But there is still a distance that's given between you and the actors because of the parts of the helmet that come out in front of your face. You have to be aware, and it adds weight to your head as well. So, in a sense, it kind of helped me. It's like I am wearing a mask, but the front is cut out in a sense. So, like, I could still tap into the fact that I was technically wearing a mask to help inform my performance without being hindered by it, I guess. So I guess that's why I'm saying like yes and no. Um, but I'm also very experienced in mocap, so once I put the helmet on, I'm not really aware I'm even wearing it after a while. So wearing a mask as Wrench for weeks on end, like the helmet, didn't really make a difference. I did the one thing I did have to do, which I think I did well, was I had to be aware of the fact that Wrench couldn't just shift his eyes to look at someone. So I made more of a point to turn my body and turn his head. And I think you see that in his performance. He's much more physically engaged with people. He doesn't do like subtle things where if you're just like on a laptop where you might just slide your eyes over at someone, Wrench would turn to look at them because he doesn't have peripheral vision, and his little camera's here, right? So that was a nice detail I added, which I think translated well. But I wouldn't say it was a hindrance. But it was a fun challenge. It was awesome, you know. Like, and then I had to do the same thing again for Bloodline, right? For the DLC for Legion, I went back and put the helmet on again and worked with a different team. So it was nice. I just got to pick up where I'd left off, really, even though it'd been years. And it was nice just kind of slip back into that skin, you know.
Was it any different being back for Bloodline? Like, has anything changed? Because like, did the technology change over what, like 4 years?
A little. It wasn't. I mean, I've seen the technology's evolved continuously since I've started. Those helmets used to be torture. They give you a massive headache. They used to have cables running out the back where you'd need your own PA, like a production assistant, for each actor to gather the cables and move them around so actors weren't tripping over each other. Now it's all Wi-Fi, it's remote, it's lighter materials. I mean, so it was different in a few ways. I mean, all the Watchdog stuff I did, 1 and 2, was in Montreal, but Legion was in Toronto. So I went to Ubisoft Toronto, which is a different team, a different volume. The volume is what you call the space we shoot in, this big empty space with the cameras. So the volume was different. Great team, though. I got to meet new people, and I'd also worked with them before on Far Cry 6, not too long before. So I knew the team. So when I came back as Wrench, I was familiar with them, which was lovely. The director was different, but the team, the technical team, was the same. So technology was a bit different. Like they have a slightly different helmet or a slightly different way of doing your warm up. Not your warm up, but your T pose. Not your T pose. Your ROM. Sorry, your range of motion. You do a bunch of movements with your body in the suit before you shoot, so they can calibrate the system. So that was a bit different. You know, little things like that. Maybe where they put the dots on your face was different. And then, of course, you know, the Wrench is older. He's got some history now since Watchdog, so you know that's different. He's not exactly the same person. He'd even given up the mask in a sense, right? So you know, we discover very subtly that he's bisexual. You know, that doesn't have a big impact on his character or his story, but they're all things that are new about him, right? So you know, I have to factor that in. But that's awesome. That's you know, there's such a joy to coming back to a character you've already played who's evolved. It's such a nice challenge without the insecurity of like, am I going to create a good character here? Like for me, I'm like, what's awesome is I didn't know if what I was doing was going to work or not when I played the Wrench the first time. In fact, when the director's like, give me 100% motor mouth, you know, as big as you can, and I said, as big as I can. Do you know who you're talking to? Like, I can be huge. And he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like, okay. So we do a take. And then after the take, he comes up, he's like, okay, yeah, take it down by 10, 15%, right? So we had to find the character. And we found him. Like, he used to be much more like slapsticky, you know, but we found the character. And then I played him consistently. So coming back as Wrench, now that I have the character, was lovely. And it's an opportunity you don't get a lot as an actor. I imagine, on some sense, it's a bit like how Mark Hamill feels when he gets to play Luke again, or you know, Michael Keaton if he gets to play Batman again, right? So to come back with the confidence of the performance, but being able to face new challenges, forge new relationship, you know, like how's Wrench gonna deal with Aiden versus Aiden's son, right? How would he? What would he think of the uploading the brains to the AI machine stuff that that woman was doing, or you know, like that's the new challenge, but it comes from a place of confidence and sureness. So that was awesome. That was like as great an opportunity and an experience as the first time I did Watch Dogs because it was this nice mix of familiarity with something that was new. I didn't have the nice camaraderie of the team we had in the first Watch Dogs, which is one of my favorite, in the Watch Dogs 2, which was one of my favorite aspects of the whole production is Ruffin and Talia, and you know, everyone was just so great. Um, but here, like I got to really hang out and get to know better. Noam, who I'd worked with a bit on the first Watchdog. Noam's great. He's such a generous. I actually became a better actor watching him work, watching his process. That was awesome. I forget Knox, I think, was the woman who played this, I forget the scientist's name, the doctor who does the AI stuff, but she was terrific. She was such a great actor. So, I love being surrounded with talented people because then I feel like I get to grow as an actor as well. So yeah, I mean, it was some challenges, but overall, like the opening monologue when Wrench is like, "Oh, I'm gonna, mess you up," and he takes the sledgehammer and he breaks the laptop. Like I remember getting that scene and being like, "Oh boy, what are all the things I can do with this as Wrench? I can do this. I can make a reference to that. I'm going to change this line." Like I really can't ask for anything better as an actor than that kind of scenario. When I got that email from my agent saying, "Hey, they want to know if you're free to reprise Wrench for this DLC," like that was probably one of the best days of my life in you know for the time. It was terrific news because it's like the holy grail for an actor, I find, being called back to a part you've already established.
And also on the note of
So where I was
Legion,
going there. There's a
when
bit
you
of
came
a
back,
blizzard
you
happening here,
were
so if you hear a
yeah,
lot of
instead
snow
of in Watch
blowers in the
Dogs 2,
distance,
where
I
you're like a kind of
apologize.
a
It's
side
all my
character,
neighbors trying to dig
you're part of the
themselves
main
out.
crew, but you were on like the side. You were like the main. You're one of the headlining characters, and you were back. You were with Aiden Pierce. You were with Geordie again, and it's like, was it? Were you nervous? Because you got like Aiden was such like a big fan favorite from the first game, and then Wrench is like a fan favorite from the second game. You kind of got to like come together.
That's a great question. A lot of great questions today. I wouldn't say I was nervous. I was excited, and I think I was. I'm a fairly anxious person by nature. When I go into a situation that I have never been in before, it stresses me out. I'll lose sleep, and until I've been in that situation, like any new project I get on, if it's a film, voice pro, film, voice, mocap, whatever. My first day on set in studio, I'm always very nervous the day before because I'm like, there's all these variables and I'm an anxious person, so I can't, I don't have a lot of control. But once I go and I have a day there and I know who I'm dealing with, what's the nature of the production, how do they roll, then I calm all the way down and I start to really enjoy the process. So because I'd been to Toronto before for Far Cry 6 and worked with that team, because I'd worked with Noam before on Watch Dogs, arresting him or, getting stabbed in front of him by Jordy or being threatened by him in the prison, I wasn't nervous about how my interactions would be. And in terms of the fans, I don't want to sound arrogant when I say this, but I was really surprised by the fan reaction to Wrench, by just how much people loved Wrench. But I was also not surprised because I've always thought he was such a great character. And I know that if I didn't know or have anything to do with Wrench and I encountered him in the game, I'd be like, I love this guy. He's great, right? So I think the strength of the writing really carried Wrench. Yeah, I absolutely have a lot to do with that. I helped them write it in a sense, and I improvise a lot of the lines, and they tapped into my love of pop culture to kind of give Wretch that aspect, and that's very collaborative. And that to me is the best way to make art is to collaborate. Um, but I was aware of Wrench's power, of how loved he was, and how I knew how excited people would be to see him again. And I knew how excited people would be to see Aiden again, because they're both really iconic characters. In fact, not to take anything away from Ruffin, who did an amazing job as Marcus, but I find Aiden is the standout character in Watch Dogs because it's his story. But in Watch Dogs 2, it tends to be Wrench. I find that people tend to identify with or invest in a bit more. In my personal experience, I don't have the macro view of it, but that's my impression when I look at forums, when I talk to people. Um, so my only concern was like, and this is true whether it's a movie, TV show, video game, whatever, is the writing good? If the writing is good, if the story is good, if the dialogue is good, it'll be well received. And if it's bad, it will be poorly received. I'm a huge Marvel fan, Star Wars, all those big things. I love them. But I don't love their products because I'm a fan. I love their products when they have good writing, right? So when I see a Marvel show today, a lot of them have crap writing now. I'm out, right? But the earlier stuff, my God, Phases 1 to 3, culminating in Infinity War and Endgame, to me is like exquisite, holy grail, wonderful, right? So when I read the script for Bloodlines, I really thought it was solid. It was a solid story. I loved what they were doing with Aiden, his introspection, him dealing with his demons, his past, referring to Watch Dogs 1, and then doing the same thing with Wrench. Wrench also finding a way to separate him from DedSec to make him exist as his own character, which surprised me because I never saw Wrench as a lead. I'm like, he's a very strong supporting character, but I think people might get annoyed at him being Wrench as a lead the whole time. And I think I was wrong. I think he does work well if he's well written. And they did a very smart thing in separating the storyline between Aiden and Wrench. So you get to have two very different but complementary performances and characters. So I think the way they paired them, and the way uh, they never had one person be better than the other, right? That's the danger. You see that a lot with legacy characters today. Like, oh, Rey's she's better than Luke and she's better than Han. And they're like, well, come on, they're the OGs. You can't just sideline them like that, right? I get why fans don't like that, right? Um, so they never came out like that. Brilliantly when Wrench fights Aiden. Wrench technically wins, but he wins because he gets lucky, right? And in a straight up fight, Aiden would kick the shit out of Wrench. He lost because he was fighting Wrench on his turf on a drone. And Wrench had gadgets, and Wrench pulled every trick out of the bag, had a cloaking device, right? But then when Aiden shows up at Wrench's hideout later, there's no contest. None. Wrench doesn't even try to fight. Aiden pushes him down and he threatens him, and Wrench's like, oh, hey, let's talk because I can't use violence against you. You're too strong, right? So that's a great dynamic. You can be Team Wrench, you can be Team Aiden, but what I love is you don't need to be Team anyone. You can be just Team DedSec, which is both those guys, right? So I thought that I went into the production knowing that with the script in hand, going, they're gonna love this. I was so excited for the fans that we were doing this and doing it so well that it made the entire process, like, I was never nervous. And again, not to sound arrogant, but I was never like, I knew as we were filming, as I was committing bits to film, to digital film, as I was shooting and rehearsing with Aiden and with Noam, and just recording scenes as we were ticking them off the list and getting them done. I'm like, this is all such good stuff. I do not see how this isn't going to be well received. And I think I was right. I think it's okay. You can look at art objectively sometimes if you're involved with it to an extent, and have an idea, like, just like when you're working on something crappy sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, I haven't worked on a lot of productions I've considered to be garbage where I'm like, oh my God, this is so bad. Maybe in my early days, but I've been blessed to be able to work on a lot of projects that I'm like, oh my God, this is really good stuff. I recently said yes to two very small, low budget independent films that I don't usually do now because it's a lot of time. But both of them, I read the script, the writing was amazing. I'm like, oh my God, I want to be a part of this. Did them both, and they both like won prizes and festivals and stuff. Um, so I think I'm lucky that I get to work on good projects. And like those two films, I'm like, oh, I can tell as I'm shooting this is going to be great. So yeah, I think that was the case with Bloodline.
Um, so back like to like the character of Wrench, how did you create the voice? Because also like his voice has like the effects over the top. So like necessarily, did you not hear his final voice until you played the game, or like did you get a taste of it before that?
So, well, like I mentioned earlier, Wrench was, originally conceived as another type of character. He was going to be a big, tough bruiser guy, probably spoke like this, some tough dude. And the director thought that was really boring and stereotypical and a bit of a trope. And I completely agree. I love subverting expectations, not for the sake of subverting expectations, okay, but when it's done properly, it's a great device you can use for when creating something lasting. So one of my friends once described Wrench as me without a filter, right? And that's actually not a bad approximation. So, when I worked with Lars on the first Watch Dogs DLC, um, uh, in between takes in the green room, before and after the workday, we chat, and I'm a big fan of I'm a big fan of sorry, my dog's barking. I'm a That's why. Sorry about that. I'm a big fan of, like I said, pop culture. So we talk about RoboCop and Aliens, and Predator, and he's roughly my age, so we grew up watching the same things and nerding out about the same things. So he got a real good um, impression of my personality, and I'm a fairly manic person. I was more so when I was a bit younger, but I'm fairly high energy. Um, we're doing an interview, so I'm a little bit more restrained, but I joke a lot, and I'm kind of a good humored kind of guy. So I think um, Lars saw that, and he's like, "That's the kind of energy I want. Just up it. Take away your because there's jokes I won't make in person, or I'll read the room, and if someone's depressed or sad or wants some space or privacy, I won't. I'll respect that. So I'm not saying Wrench is disrespectful, but Wrench is more like a kid with ADHD. You know what I mean? Like he's just like all the time, which is like a defense mechanism. Um, I have a bit more social awareness than Wrench does. Also, as a professional actor, I can't. I don't want to be annoying to the people around me, or I'm not going to work as much. So I just got to really remove the filter from who I was and just indulge myself in being manic. And my voice has a fairly natural range to it to begin with. So, it's Saturday morning. I'm talking interviews, so I'm using my inside voice. But when I get excited, when I get engaged with, so my voice tends to go up like pretty high, like, oh my God, again, like my voice tends to pitch up when I get very manic. So it's pretty much that, just shifting my energy into that space, and the voice, it's not a voice I have to think about putting on. Like, I play like Machiavelli had an Italian accent. So when I spoke, I had to make sure I was doing the dialect, the accent justice. And when I play Lion in Rainbow Six, same thing. I have to make sure my French accent is, up to snuff. Wrench, I don't think about it. I don't think about putting on the voice. It's just there because it comes with the energy, if you will. So, uh, once we did a few takes in the demo, and I was just talking really quickly and just making jokes and just kind of just trying to be on all the time, almost to the point of it being annoying. And then we scaled it back and we kind of found that place for the character. So, um, I'm not against working on characters, of course, or putting in the work and taking a script and breaking it down. But I find sometimes it's easier for me to just go with my instinct. Like I've been an actor long enough that when I see a character, there'll be a voice there, just kind of automatically. And I'll just go with that. And usually that's good enough. And then whoever I'm working with will just fine tune it a bit. And voila, you know what I mean? And I've got very good body memory for movement and stuff. So the oral posture of where Wrench is and his physicality is still there. And like I'm on Cameo, I do little videos for fans sometimes and stuff. So like often, I'd say most of my requests are for a Wrench. So I'll just slap on the Wrench mask, and I don't have to again be like, okay, how am I going to approach the character? Like he's just there, when I just kind of turn him on. Most people won't see him if I just turn him on because I don't have the mask. It's just the voice in that case. You know what I mean? Um, but like in again, I don't want to seem lazy, but to me, he was just there because he was really just an extension of who I am. Like there was, I'd say 80, 90% of Wrench is just me kind of blown up. And then the other 10, 15% is, stuff I've added in where he differs from me quite a lot. Like he jokes about hating puppies and all that stuff, or animals are out to get us. Whereas I love animals. I have two dogs. I would never say a mean word about a puppy. I have much more respect for the law than Wrench does. Wrench is an anarchist. Fuck the law. I'm like, we need laws to an extent, or it'd be chaos. You know what I mean? Um, so like stuff like that differs, but that's why I love playing him so much because I can just get to be myself and just kind of tap into this energy that comes up for the character.
Marcus and Wrench, they've got a chemistry. And it's like when you were there and you like met Ruffin on set, was it there? Did you have to work on that? And also how was that chemistry when you got to come back and you got your little mission together in Bloodline?
Again, great questions. So, how can I put this? So when I did the demo, which it's called the vertical slice, which is basically like a sample of gameplay elements, characters, and story that you present to the producers, show them what you want to do with the game. They approve, say, I like this actor, I don't like this actor, I like this mechanic, we need microtransactions, whatever. Um, right. So when I did the vertical slice, I was working with a gentleman named, oh God, am I gonna forget his name now? Michael? Oh my God, I'm forgetting his name. Anyway, this really, really great guy who played up, um, who played Marcus. And he kind of, we got along great. And he drove this dynamic between us, right? At one point, like we're looking out over the city from a rooftop, and he goes GG, and then like I think he or I like slaps the other guy in the ass, you know what I mean, in a friendly way. Um, and he kind of allowed me almost to play up this almost like jokingly homoerotic dynamic between us, right? Like that was possible because he was so open, right? He wasn't this like toxic macho kind of guy who might view that as like, don't fucking do that, man. Don't touch me or don't talk that way, right? He was super vulnerable and open and a lovely, lovely man. Um, I honestly don't know why they replaced him. I mean, I thought Marcus did a tremendous job as Ruffin, but it wasn't one of those instances where I saw Ruffin and went, "Oh, I get it." I was like, "Yeah, he does as good a job, but differently than how the other guy did it." Um, the point of this is that when I met Marcus Ruffin and we started rehearsing together, I kind of brought that dynamic, the dynamic between uh, the previous Marcus and Wrench. I brought that dynamic to rehearsal and kind of just led with that instinctively with Marcus. And luckily, Ruffin is one of the most generous, open, vulnerable, honest men I've ever met. He's such a great, connected actor. He's just really peaceful and he's lovely. He has a lovely energy. So anything I threw at him, he would just take and throw back, and we developed that chemistry very quickly. And I grew to like Ruffin as a friend and as a person very, very quickly, just like I did Jonathan Dubsky, who plays Josh. In fact, Ruffin lives in New York, but I still see Jonathan. Like his wife and his kid came over the other day. They were our guests, and we went and visited them in the summer. We see each other 2, 3 times a year, every year almost, because we were really good friends. They have 2 dogs. We have 2 dogs. Um, like it was a real bond that we created. So whenever I'd throw something at Marcus, chemistry wise, he would take it and give it back. So it allowed me to do something that I'm very comfortable with, which is me being vulnerable. And I have a very how can I put this? I think the image of what it is to be masculine, or the image of masculinity today, is can be a bit of a toxic one. Okay. I think masculinity shouldn't be measured by your capacity for violence, or how many women you had sex with, or what kind of car you drive, or how many mansions you have. Like everything is like, go get that money and go get that cash, and what's your body count? And I'm like, none of these things make you a man. To me, masculinity is determined by your compassion, your self-discipline, your capacity for love, your willingness to defend people weaker than you. Like, these traits to me are more masculine, and it's embracing femininity, embracing women, embracing your own femininity too, right? I'm not saying everyone has to be on the gender fluid scale or anything, but I think me being so comfortable with those aspects of me and not viewing them as unmasculine allowed me to play Wrench as someone who wasn't toxic or macho, right? It's so easy to have a dynamic between two men, which is based on macho behavior, demeaning women, being racist, elevating your being elitist or ableist, elevating yourself over other people because you happen to be young and powerful and male. In Wrench's case, white. You know what I mean? So because Marcus allowed me to exist as Wrench, as this like guy who likes unicorns and who can make like sexy jokes to another man without it meaning necessarily that he's gay, uh, it just shows a vulnerability. And what's funny is I played Wrench, his sexuality, I didn't ever think about it. Like I just play Wrench according to my sexuality, and I'm a straight I'm a straight guy, right? Um, I'm completely open and supportive of all the LGBTQ plus spectrum. Um, but because I played him as almost ambiguously enamored with Marcus, a lot of fans projected onto that he was either gay or bi. Some people even asked me or hoped he was trans, right? And to all those suggestions, when people would write to me like, "What's the answer to that question?" I was like, "It's whatever you want it to be. It's I will never ever tell a fan you can't view Ranch a certain way." Okay, and I've seen I've seen fan art of Wrench wearing tutus or making out with T-Bone or any number of things that might upset someone who's like homophobic or whatever, right? I think it's wonderful. I embrace all of it because, first of all, once something is put out into pop culture, it kind of belongs to the culture. It doesn't belong to the actor. You know what I mean? So if someone wants to draw value from Wrench in a way that he wasn't meant, as long as you're not hurting anyone, right? If someone said, "Oh, Wrench hates Jewish people," then I'd be like, "No, that is absolutely, I don't condone that because Wrench would not be racist like that, you know." In any way, would he ever be racist? But if they're like, "Oh, he's trans or he's gay or he's this or him and Marcus or I ship this, I ship that," knock yourself out, right? Doesn't change anything to my life. And if it brings you joy, absolutely, go for it. So when I played Ranch with those kind of non-macho traits to him, which again, it wasn't really a choice. It was just me, just because I'm like that. I'll joke around that way with my friends. You know what I mean? I have almost more female friends than male friends in my life, especially nowadays. You know, bringing all that into the game, I think added this lovely like tenderness and vulnerability to both characters, which people really dialed into. And some people were projected into it romantically. Others just like, this is a great example of a non-toxic, healthy relationship between two men. So, there's a scene at one point where uh, Marcus is lying on a couch. He's super exhausted. I think he was captured and we free him or something. I don't remember now. And he's like, "I just want to sleep." And Wrench is like, "What happened, Marcus? Tell me, please." And he won't. And I crouch down next to the couch and I do this, right? And I go, "Please." And his eyes become hearts. You know what I mean? If Ruffin wasn't such an open, wonderful guy, I never would have felt comfortable following those instincts. You know what I mean? To do those things around him. Like if he was a much more toxic guy, I might have been like, "Yo, man, do you have to do that?" It's like maybe fist bump me, or like he just took whatever I gave and he gave it back. And it works well. And I think that's why people love the character because no one's being shitty about it. And from an acting standpoint, it was Wrench's way of like showing his love and his trust of the people in DedSec because he would always fuck with people along their vulnerabilities in a sense. If you think about it, like Josh doesn't like to be touched. He doesn't like people touching his stuff. So if you watch Wrench, what's he always doing? He's always touching Josh. He's always putting his fingers in his face, grabbing his hand, locking him in the car, touching his stuff, sitting in his seat, right? He does it out of love because he wants to poke Josh's buttons. Ruffin's just kind of cool, hip kind of guy. So Ranch is always like, you know, "Marcus, I love you," right? He's always trying to make him a bit uncomfortable with that because it's his way of showing him his affection. You'll notice he doesn't fuck with Satara because Satara, she don't play, right? Whereas T-Bone, Wrench and him have this like mentor apprentice relationship where Wrench first is very aggressive because he feels like T-Bone's going to replace him, and then he realizes, "Oh my God, you got so much to teach me," right? So all of that is possible because of what the other actors it gave me and allowed me to work with, right? So it's this very intuitive but very collaborative process in the end. All these decisions we got to make, we did them together, and all under the helm of the director. And I think it all translated beautifully into the game.
Yeah, and you were talking about like all the relationships Wrench has with different characters, and you know, could you have sold it as effectively, like the whole DedSec as a family. They're like a family unit, basically, when you think about it. Could you have sold it if it was a different cast, it was a less supportive cast? Or is it like the perfect group?
I mean, that's a very hypothetical question. It's hard to answer because it really depends. Like, if it wasn't those people, who would it be, right? Um, I tend to view DedSec how it's cast, much like you tend to view some iconic castings, like, oh, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, or Wesley Snipes as Blade, or any number of, Ian McKellen as Gandalf, right? Like, you see these casting and you go, I don't know if it could have worked with someone else. But the thing is, we don't know, right? There's a timeline out there where it's someone else playing Gandalf. There's a timeline out there where it's Tom Selleck playing Indiana Jones because that was the initial choice for the role, right? Um, what's that like? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it just different? Right? I often think like, had I not played Wrench, how would he come across? Right? Now, I'm biased. My personal opinion is like, well, I think I bring something so unique to Wrench, it's almost impossible to replicate. So it would just be a different character, and he just hit differently. Would he be as good or better? I don't know. Um, I think it's possible with other as good actors, we would get something as good, just different. You know what I mean? Um, but I feel about the cast the same way that I feel about like I just bought a house and I've been here for 2 years, and you'd be we paid a lot of money for it because it was during the housing boom, the market boom, which was crazy and still is. And I was talking to a friend just the other day, and they're like, "You paid how much?" But I'm like, it doesn't matter how much I paid because I love this house. It's perfect for me, right? And you'd be hard pressed to point to another house, and go, you could have lived there, you could have lived there, right? I just feel in my gut the best possible parameters aligned for me to live here. I feel the same way about DedSec, that all the people they cast for the reasons they cast them just worked. And if you think about it, I mean, not a lot of people know this, but like Matthew, that's his name. Okay, I'm glad I remember his name. Matthew Brown. Matthew, the one who played Marcus initially, he got replaced by Ruffin. They kept me as Wrench. They hired John as Josh. Sitara was another actor initially. It was this I don't remember her name now. We didn't work with her very long. This Indian girl. She was cast initially to be the character of Sitara, and then I think she was pregnant. I don't really remember, and it was starting to change her morphology, which is a problem in mocap because you need exact data day to day. So they had to replace her, and that's when Sitara was swapped to the Italian. Is that her name? Oh my god, I haven't spoken to her in so long. I feel like such an asshole. So when she came on, like that changed because the first Sitara had a different relationship with Wrench, right? Like Wrench and her, it wasn't romantic, but it was a lot closer. And then my dynamic with the new actor was just different. The way she related to me and Josh and Marcus and John um, was different. So, would that dynamic be different with a different actor had they kept her? Maybe. Um, but I like to think, Watch Dogs 2 is as beloved as it is because all that time just came together at the right time. It's like, it's not as big as I don't think the game is as big as it could be because the casting was great, but I think the timing of the game wasn't perfect. I think had it been released a little later, it might have done better. Or had it not lived under the shadow of the first Watch Dogs and all the controversy of the kind of lying about the graphics at the
Oh, how
E3.
the trailer and the actual product.
Yeah, the downgrading that did affect sales because a lot of people had lost faith in the brand by that point, and I think that impacted how well received the game was. Which is too bad because it's even more relevant today in a sense. It was kind of ahead of its time. So it's things are a product of their timing as well. Um, you see movies come out, they're terrific, but they just the John Carpenter's The Thing is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Today it's a classic. It's a masterpiece. But when it came out, people hated it. It didn't do well at all, right? So video games are a bit different because I don't think you're going to be playing a Gen 3, Gen 4 game 15 years from now when they're up to the PlayStation 40. You know what I mean? Like whatever they release down the line. So video games are a bit different that way. But I'm still hopeful maybe one day something that was created through that brand or that franchise might pop up again in the future. And I'm kind of hopeful. Like I think the DCEU was a big mess, like the whole cinematic thing, but it's got to be amazing for someone like Michael Keaton who did Batman 30 years ago and he's just going about his life. They're like, hey, do you want to reprise this guy in this new context? Like, I don't think it was a very good movie, but that must have been fun for him. So who knows? Maybe 5 years, 10 years from now, there'll be a Ubisoft hub world where you can go and play any game with any character, interact with anyone. And they'll need, their actors from the last 20 years to come back and do so. Who knows? There might be new technology that allows me to reinterpret Wrench again in some way, which would be lovely. I'm open to the possibility. But also, my whole career isn't just Wrench. Like I do other things, and I love doing other things, and I love doing new things. So hopefully, it'll be a mix of both. Down the line.
Have you had any like memorable fan art or fan experiences? Because I know, like, especially for you, you're very active on like the Twitter. You're always like retweeting all the bits.
Yeah.
So does any of it stand out for you?
Yeah, so I've had quite a lot. Oh, I realized I didn't answer the second half of your previous question. Uh, the bits with Marcus in Bloodline, I never got to work with him. I recorded my lines in studio, and he recorded his separately. I only found out when I read the script, and I'm like, and then I asked him, like, is this Marcus Marcus? They're like, yeah. I'm like, oh shit. So I couldn't even react off of what he was doing. But luckily, and I recorded first, so I didn't even have his lines I could refer to. But luckily, I knew Ruffin well enough. I could really imagine how he'd be saying these lines as Marcus, and I just reacted off of that, and I thought it turned out pretty well. In terms of fan interaction, I mean, yeah, the greatest, most unexpected bonus to being an actor in video games in this day and age of social media is fan interaction. Um, Back in the day, it used to be if you're a fan of, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you have to write him a letter and hope he gets back to you, which you probably won't, or you got to go to a premiere and stand in line and scream his name and hope he autographs and maybe takes a second to shake your hand, or go to Comic-Con if they make an appearance and stand in line and spend money. Now you just pick this thing up, go, hey, you're great, or hey, you suck. And there's a chance that person will be like, hey, thanks, or hey, fuck you, right? I follow Arnold Schwarzenegger on Twitter, which is amazing. So I get to see what he posts, and I don't interact with him, but I mean, it's possible, right? As opposed, like, that gap has been so narrowed. So I got a ton of fan art consistently since Watch Dogs 2 came out. And then again, when Legion came out and Bloodline, um, to this day, almost every week, I see a new piece of Wrench fan art. To this day, it's incredible. Um, I have one of my best friends started as a fan. This woman who's a friend of mine, her name is Medea. She started off as an Assassin's Creed fan, then she was a Watch Dogs fan, and then we met. We spoke over Twitter, and then one day she came to Montreal to Comic Con or something, and I met her, and then she became one of my closest friends. Now we game almost every weekend. Her and I game online. She's been a guest in my house a couple of times. She come into town to see, to do stuff. So, like, that's someone started as a fan of mine is now one of my closest friends, which I think is incredible. Just all the fan art, all the support, all the tokens, the gifts that people have sent me over the years, just the consideration of, the lengths people go to support me, ordering cameos. Just all that stuff has been just terrific. I'd be really hard pressed to single out like my favorite fan interaction. But my friend Medea becoming my friend is a big one. There's this lovely woman named Lumi who is a big fan of Watch Dogs who custom handmade a complete Wrench cosplay outfit for me and sent that to me by mail years ago. And I use it to this day to do cameos or whatever. So like that was incredibly generous. People making artwork about my dog, just making artwork with my dog. I love my dogs. I've had people send me gifts from overseas, like handcrafted little Wrench figurines, artwork, keychains, you name it. So I'm still not really used to that aspect. And I think that's why I'm so responsive to people, is because I don't view it as like, oh, I'm a celebrity and they're my fans, right? It's like, I'm just a guy. I'm just working, right? I'm just doing my thing. And these are people who like what I do. And they're kind enough and supportive enough to take time out of their day to reach out to me. So who am I to ignore that? You know what I mean? And let's face it, it's not like I get 50,000 messages a day and I can't keep up with all of them. You know, on a birthday, it'll get overwhelming because I get a lot of, which is lovely, but that's one day a year. But normally, a reply or two a day here or there, maybe that's nothing to me. If I'm scrolling on my phone, I have time to go to Twitter and go, hey, thanks so much for the compliment, or I love your artwork, keep it up. Um, to me, that's a no-brainer. You know what I mean? And it's validating, right? I want to be careful. I don't want to be like, oh, I love it. I get all this attention. But it's validating. It's nice as an artist, as objective as I can get with art, is other people that who don't owe me anything going out of the way to go, hey, I think you're great. I love what you do. Thank you. You've had a tremendous impact on my you helped me through a depression, or to come out of the closet, or like crazy stuff I never intended when I started as an actor. I didn't go, oh, let me audition for a game, I'm sure this will help people through their darkest moments of their life, right? You don't correlate the two, but it's this added bonus and added, I guess, responsibility. Like, I'm gonna very say something very nerdy right now, but like, one of my favorite expressions is from Spider-Man, right? With great power, there must come great responsibility. I consider fandom and stardom power, because you have people's attention. I can say anything. I could ask anything. Doesn't mean they'll do anything, but I can influence people. If I was a huge transphobe or anti-vaxxer, right? And I really peddled that, I'd have I'd have like 5,000 people's ears as opposed to no one, right? That's roughly my Twitter following. So I need to be responsible with that. So with that power, and people also give me the benefit of the doubt, they assume I'm a good person because I bring them joy through my work. Now, I try to be a good person, but that's kind of crazy that people will believe me or take my word or give me the benefit of the doubt they wouldn't give a stranger, because I happen to talk like a guy who talks like this on occasion, right? That's kind of crazy if you think about it. So the least I can do is be responsible with that power. So can I promote tolerance, equality, compassion? Absolutely. If I can set that example, I think I should, and I do. I try to. So I don't, you know, I love the trappings of having fans and followers, and that's lovely. But I want to always make sure that I use that platform and that power responsibly, because I think, especially in our day and age, like there's so many, especially younger people, just getting flooded with attention and likes and traffic, streamers and TikTokers, and it's making a lot of people crazy. They're doing crazy shit. They're forgetting who they are. They're valuing the wrong things. Look how much money I'm driving a Porsche. It's like, okay, but who are you? Who do you believe? What do you stand for? Right? So I don't think I'm young enough to fall into that trap, because had I known success when I was younger, maybe it would have, who knows, maybe it would have gone to my head. But being an older person, I get to just take it in stride and just kind of enjoy it for what it is, which is lovely. So yeah, it's a huge, huge perk of being an actor. It's just, and I love talking to people. So when someone like you is like, hey, I'm doing a thing, and are you free? I'm like, yeah, sure. If I have time, absolutely. I will never say to someone like, no, you're not worth an hour of my time on a Saturday. You know what I mean? Um, I don't want to get taken advantage of, and I want to make sure that people I deal with are legit, and not just like, oh, he's a celebrity. Let me take up his time to boost myself. Um, but you've been great since the get go. Like, you've been really polite and well organized, and that's the kind of interactions I like. So good on you, man.
All right, thank you. I've got one more question for you.
Sure,
I'm going to
sure.
start wrap things up. So say there's a fourth game and you get the phone call and they want you to be in it. Like, would you be interested if there was a fourth game? And like, people have been talking about it, nothing's confirmed, or like no even like solid rumors, but like, would you want a fourth game?
Absolutely. I mean, Watch Dogs is probably the best time I've ever had working on a video game. And I've had a lot of great times. I've worked on a lot of really cool projects, but Watch Dogs was magical. And it's funny too, because, that was at a point in my life where I was actually injured. I'd herniated a disc in my back. I was really badly injured. I had a bad limp. I was in pain all the time. And I had to work through that to do Watch Dogs. And when I think of that time in my life, I just think about the good times. I don't think about any of the pain or the depression that it caused me. Um, that's how strong it was. So a fourth game, absolutely. My hope would be that it's a good story. You know what I mean? Um, but what I like about a character I've played before is even if the writing's not great, I have the power to come and improve it, right? The writers did a tremendous job of capturing the essence of Wrench for Bloodline. It wasn't at all the same writer. And that's hard to do because you could easily misfire with Wrench, right? They did an incredible job. But luckily, they were open to feedback. So when I read the script, 90% of it, I was like, this is perfect. But about 10%, I'm like, I can make this funnier. I don't think Wrench would quite say it this way. Let me make it about this or about that, right? A good example is initially in one of the missions, he goes into that woman's house with the AI, and there's a hologram of her, and he talks to the hologram. And when he first pulls up in the script, initially he said, "Oh, cool hologram. Do you think if I touched it, it would burn me?" Right? And I'm like, okay, that's not really funny though. Like Wrench would probably use a hologram as an excuse to make some kind of joke, right? So I kind of workshopped with the writers a bit, and we settled on like, oh, cool hologram. Is this about the Death Star plans? Right, which is a Star Wars reference, right? Terrific line. I love that line. People loved it. So that's what I mean. Like I could come in and add my love of Star Wars and pop culture to the character and create this synergy. So if that existed for um, a new game, I would absolutely be on board. And I'd be surprised if they sent me a script. I'm like, nope, forget it. Pays well, it's work. And I believe, and Ubisoft is. I've never worked on a project from Ubisoft where I thought this is garbage. Like they have very high standards when it comes to writing and the creative aspects. They might get sucked up with microtransactions and some of the more games as a service bullshit that's happening, NFTs and all that stuff. But it doesn't affect the quality of their writing, which to me is super important in a game. You play a game for the gameplay loop, admittedly, not for the writing, but good writing can elevate a game to legendary status. God of War, Last of Us. I mean, these are Uncharted. These are really good examples of good, fun games getting elevated to like masterpieces through like excellent story writing. So yeah, if I could reprise Wrench, I'd love to. I haven't heard anything either. I, I think Ubisoft is in a stage of kind of wondering who they are right now, almost like Disney Star Wars, and being like, let's refocus on, because they had a few misfires, cancellations. Um, but I'm open to the possibility, like I said earlier, I think it's possible Reds would come back in some way. Probably not the way we expect. Maybe it'll be a cameo. Maybe it'll be a mission giver in another game. Maybe it'll be, who knows, down the line, 10 years from now. Um, I feel like all games and media are heading towards this singularity in a sense. You know what I mean? Like Fortnite is like Fortnite's everything now. You got Star Wars, you got Lego, you got Marvel. Um, I think we could see that across a lot of platforms eventually. So in whatever form he comes back, as long as they respect the character and he's well written, I would love to do it because he's one of my favorite characters that I ever played. Here's hoping.
All right. Just before we run out of time, anything you wanna, any links people should see, or
Oh yeah, thanks for that. So I mean, I'm not really working. I mean, I've worked on a few projects that have been announced, but I can't say I worked on that because I'm not playing a main character. I can only share that once the game is released. There are games coming out this year, releasing this year that I'm in, so I'll be more than happy to announce that when the time comes. But I could plug. I'm on Twitter, so just look me up on Twitter. Um, uh, Shawn Baichoo at Twitter, right? Or X, I guess. If thanks, Elon. I'm also on Instagram under Chubei, Choobai, which is Baichoo, my last name, but swap Chubei on Instagram. And I'm also on Cameo, so you can go to Cameo and order up a video where I can do like birthday greetings or just a shout out or whatever as myself or as a character. I offer that service, and I'm also on a new service called Streamily, which does live signings over streams. So you go to the store, you go to Streamily, you look me up, streamily.com, look me up. You can order prints, and when I get enough orders, I can either do a personalized signing or I'll do like a stream. I did two last year. It went really well, where I interact with fans, sign prints live, and then I ship them off. I send them back to Streamily, and then they distribute them to the fans. On Twitter lately, a lot of people have been sending me photos of their signed autographs they got from me, so you can go check that out on my feed if you want. And I also have a website, ShawnBaichoo.com, where I post updates on what I'm up to and information and stuff like that, and a photo gallery and whatever else. So yeah, those are the links if you want to check. And I have a fan page as well on Facebook. So just look if anyone still goes on Facebook. I'm not there very often, but I have a fan page on Facebook as well. So yeah, those are ways of keeping up with what I'm up to.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Connor.
It's helped a lot. So thank you.
Keep me updated with what you do with the project. I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated. And
Wonderful.
thanks for your time. Right. Bye.
You're very welcome, Connor. Have a great weekend.